Hello, welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith, and I am a professional tarot reader as well as an associate marriage and family therapist. I received my training in Jungian psychology, and I really enjoy this process of looking at the archetypes that emerge from the tarot and what they might have to say about themes that we may encounter throughout the week and how we can bring insight to them and utilize them to the best of our ability as we're confronting challenges or making decisions or interacting with family members. I know that those of us who live in the United States just had the holiday Thanksgiving, and others are vastly approaching, which often means a time of gathering with family, which may or may not be a pleasurable experience for many of us. So we're also having a new moon today. And I am interested in looking at what the tarot has to say about how we can make the most of this week. So I'm going to consult the cards. I'm going to go silent and concentrate while I shuffle, and I will be with you momentarily. Okay, I'm just going to say a prayer over these cards. Hmm. All right, so some interesting themes that are emerging here. And most notably, a card that came up in my poll, I think it was for the new moon. And so let's talk about the Five of Swords. The way that, so swords in the tarot represent the mind, thoughts, ideas, communication. And the Five of Swords is something that I often associate with uh, an energy similar to writer's block. It's like a mental shutdown, the inability to sort of move beyond uh, a narrative that keeps us stuck in one way of thinking or one way of seeing the world. It's like no ground gained or lost. It's a stalemate. And ultimately, I think that the energy here is asking us to look at what are the mental narratives or mental constructs that we live our life in accordance with that keep us stuck in old patterns? How is it that we are perceiving our circumstances? How is it that we perceive others thinking about us, or even the way that we feel about ourselves that's constructed out of some idea that we have about who we are and what is possible. And again, this idea of being stuck, you know, it tends to be for most people unpleasant. Most people like to feel in some way that they're moving forward, that they are growing, that they are meeting the movement of life in an equanimous way. But, you know, in these periods of stuckness, and, you know, to some degree, we might think of this related to the planetary energy of retrogrades. So, for instance, when Mercury is in retrograde, what that means is that when we view the planet from the Earth perspective, it looks like it's traveling backwards. Now, that's sort of an illusion, but the archetypal energy is asking us to review what it is that we think or how it is that we're communicating before we can move forward in a new and maybe more effective way. I also know that Mars is retrograde right now, and you can think of the archetypal energy of Mars as being about action and will, the way that we take action in the world to create things. Sometimes it's an aggressive energy. It tends to be fiery and hot in its approach. So to some degree, there is like even a planetary archetypal presentation of this stuckness, an inability to move forward. And so how can we make the most of this time? Because this is a natural part of, you know, human and planetary cycles, to meet with limits, to slow in our momentum, to revisit themes or behaviors or relationships that don't seem to be growing or changing. And so ultimately, what this is asking us to do is, first of all, just notice where we're stuck. Notice where we're continuing to revisit the same story, and to pay attention. How's that going? How's that working for us? Is it a helpful narrative, or is it limiting our ability to see other possibilities in regards to how we are moving about the world? So, and sword energy is always a little bit tricky, you know. Obviously, uh, the mind is a powerful tool that can conceive of a plan in order to make something happen. Um, but it also, this sort of sharp edge implies that if we aren't using our mind wisely, if we aren't tracking the nature of our own thoughts, then we can often weaponize our ideas about ourselves and the world, and not be able to act to good purpose. And so again, what I'm going to suggest is that this is a good week for us to, as we're moving through our day in the coming week, to notice What is your internal narrative? How are you assessing circumstances? How are you viewing yourself and others? Is there a lot of judgment? Is there what are the perceived limitations? And just pay attention and consider, maybe even to detach from the story a little bit and imagine what its origins are, where you might have come up with that idea, and how long have you been carrying it, and what purpose has it served up till now. And simply sort of being able to study our own thoughts at this time might bring about some kind of insight that will be helpful in order for us to begin to put our energy into building structures that ultimately will be supportive. And that's really what's coming up here with the Eight of Pentacles. So Pentacles are earthbound. They're a material manifestation of resources, of the physical elements of life that we interact with on a daily basis that feed us and nourish us. And the message of the Eight of Pentacles is actually quite positive. It's really this implication that wherever we put our energy and our effort, wherever we choose to set an intention to grow something, it will come to fruition. What the energy we put into something, we will get back out in terms of fruitful product. When you tend your garden will grow. This is the message of the Eight of Pentacles, which of course means that it behooves us to notice also where we are putting our time and our energy. Are we putting it into relationships that are not bearing fruit? We put forth a bunch of effort and we don't get a whole lot in return from a partner or a colleague. Maybe it's time to reallocate our energy to a different pursuit. Are we pursuing a career path that it feels stuck or isn't bearing the fruit that we would ideally like it to? How might we shift our energy and focus towards something that feels like it's going to take care of us in some way, that it is giving us a good return on the energy that we're investing. So, these, and again, like I said, that the promise of the Eight of Pentacles is that that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's only redistributed. And ultimately that energy, you'll see the results of it. And so it behooves us to look at where we're putting our energy and to ask ourselves, is that the best use of our time? And another piece here is about connecting deeply with our emotions. And this, I think, is a really nice balancing energy to the Five of Swords. So if swords relate to the mind, then cups relate to the heart. It is the somatic experience of emotional resonance when we're, in doing things, when we're showing up and interacting with people, when we are engaged in a creative process. Inevitably, we have an emotional response to these things. And it is important to notice how it feels to be in the presence of people, places, and things. Is that feeling, and what is the feeling telling us? the King of Cups, so kings represent mastery, maturity, being highly efficacious at handling the quality of this, which would be like kind of like emotional intelligence, this ability to connect deeply with the felt sense of the body and to know what one is feeling in the moment, and to be able to be with that emotional state and maybe even articulate it in a way where you can share that experience with another in a highly masterful way. This is actually an important skill to have, and it's surprising how many of us weren't taught to do this, that big emotions tend to cause some kind of fear, which then many people resort to a kind of disassociation. It's hard to hold the intense emotion. But the ability to, developing a practice where one is able to stay with those big emotions is actually incredibly helpful, because the emotions also have something to say about whether or not we're in right alignment with things that we're pursuing or people that we're pursuing. It's a necessary way to evaluate the world, and a lot of times we only use our minds. We only decide to assess a situation based on our scientific analysis, and we discount the power and magnitude of connecting deeply with our heartfelt emotional response to something. And so I think the message here is don't just get stuck in your mind when you're considering where it is that you're putting your time and attention. Consult your emotions. How does it feel? How does it feel to be in this relationship? How does it feel to continue to go to an old narrative that doesn't seem to be moving you forward? And how might you use the energy of your emotions to reassess, to make a move in a slightly different direction, or and maybe even it's about like not holding back. Maybe the mental narrative has been something like, um, don't put in too much effort because you might be disappointed. Whereas the King of Cups is saying, if you give yourself to something completely wholeheartedly, that then progress can be made. So, you can see that there are many different ways to combine these archetypal energies, and I'm going to invite all of you to see how that might speak to your own experience. Finally, what we're being called to do, well, first of all, we're just being called to understand that we are in a cycle of life, and this is simply the way it is to be an embodied being on planet Earth, that time keeps on moving, and there will always be these themes that we return to, similar to the seasons. So right now in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in winter. We're moving into winter, moving from fall into winter. We are in the dark half of the year. We're coming up on the winter solstice. And we've been here before many, many, many times. And we will be here again many, many, many times. And so there are certain themes that that accompany this moment in the cycle of time, and it behooves us to give ourselves over to those themes, but also not to hold on too tightly, because just like we've been in winter many, many times, winter will eventually give way to spring. And so it is both this idea of returning to an old idea, an old way of being, and it feels very familiar, and it behooves us to contact the energy of that that moment in the cycle, but also to hold it loosely and to be willing to let it go and to be willing to move along with the natural flow of time. That the great constant in life is change. So we don't have to worry about being stuck permanently. It's actually not the way that nature works. We can pattern our lives on the bigger movements of nature. And then finally, there's this piece of having faith. Um, uh, Even though we may not know how everything is going to play out in our own lives, oftentimes we take action and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And we are forced to trust, to cultivate a sense of faith that we're not just screaming into the void, that we are being mirrored by a loving universe that will respond to our overtures to grow and create good lives. And I really do think that's being echoed here in the Fool. The Fool is not a fool at all. He is so connected to spirit. He trusts that if he steps off the cliff, he will be carried. In some ways, it is leap and the net will appear. It is easier to navigate these shifts, these movements of time when we feel like we're being supported or shepherded through the process in some way, where we're feeling the limitations of our own narrow view. It is helpful to zoom out and borrow the bird's eye view of the universe and trust that if we take a step and it's not quite right, that we will have room to adjust and to ultimately orient ourselves towards people, places, and things that will nourish us. So that is my hope for all of you this week and for myself as well. I hope this was helpful and I wish you many blessings.